Okay, so the last part of 9.1 is adding and subtracting radicals. So when you're adding or subtracting radicals, you want to look for what are known as like radical expressions. It's like if you're adding like terms with polynomials. So let me give you a couple of examples of like radical expressions. So 3 square root of 5. That would be a like radical expression with something like 8 square root 5. Or even -2 square root 5, and so on. Okay, it's kind of like 3x and 8x, or 3x and -2x. To have like radical expressions, you have to have the same radicand. And then you could add those together. So if I had something like 3 square root 5 plus 8 square root 5, then you just add the coefficients here. 3 plus 8, 11 square root 5. Or 3 square root 5 plus a -2 square root 5, or just -2 square root 5 would be 1 square root 5, or just the square root of 5. If you could do something like 3x plus 5x, then you could do something like this as well. So then on my next example, I want to look for like radical expressions. If I just go from left to right, 5 square root 7. The square root of 11 is not a like radical expression with that, but -8 square root 7 is. So 5 square root 7 minus 8 square root 7, -3 square root 7. I'm done with those terms. Plus or a positive square root of 11, positive or plus 4 square root of 11 is a like term with that. There's no coefficient with the square root of 11, so you could always put a 1. This is the same as 1 square root of 11 plus 4 square root of 11. So plus 5 square root of 11. These both are unlike radical expressions, so that's all you can do. That's all you can write it as. So on the next example, I have 10 square root 5 plus 7 square root 20. We actually don't start off with like radical expressions to begin with, but just because you don't start off with like radical expressions to begin with doesn't mean forget everything else that we covered in 9.1. So what I did is simplified the square root of 20. This still contains a perfect square factor. The perfect square factor is 4. 4 times 5 is 20. Then I broke up the square root of 4 times 5 as the square root of 4 times the square root of 5. The square root of 4 is 2. That comes outside of the radical. Both the 7 and then the 2 are outside the radical, so you can multiply those together. 7 times 2, 14. You still have the square root of 5. And then we have 10 square root of 5 plus 14 square root of 5. So even though we didn't start with like radical expressions, once you simplify this part right here, or actually it was this part, then they're like radical expressions. 10 square root of 5 plus 14 square root of 5 is 24 square root 5.